Hello and welcome to another episode of an HR guy telling you how HR is HR'd in the HR world. My name is BuffaloPrime and I'll be hosting you through as we read questions that are posed on the subreddit r/AskHR. I've been an HR business partner for about the past 4 or 5 years. Total HR experience around 8. I have an MBA. Let's just get into it. All right, first question reading today comes from Help Me HR Plus. And it literally just says from Illinois, help me out of this mess, please. Let's read. Hello, friends. I started a new job recently. On the second day, I had an allergic reaction before work, a very bad one. I ended up missing work that day. I talked to HR, and around 4 p.m., I saw a doctor who cleared me to return to work the following day. Then I had a meeting with HR. They asked if I went to the hospital and if I was nervous, and I said yes. That's weird. I deeply regret this decision. They then asked for a doctor's note. I furnished one from the doctor I did see, but they wanted one from the ER. There's no way of getting that, which doesn't involve forgery. What do I do? My friend is advising to just forge one. What? What kind of friend do you have? And just attach it to the email since HR more than likely just wants to close the file and won't check. That doesn't feel right to me. I'm distraught. I love this job and I would hate to have it pissed it away. Please advise. Yeah, okay. First of all, never forge a document from a medical provider to HR because guess what? We do check. So a lot of people have a misconception of what protected health information really means, right? We as a company and as HR can't talk to your doctor and be like, hey, what happened? What's going on? What happened to him? Like, we can't do that. But we can call to verify the legitimacy of a note provided. Not the contents within it, just that it was simply written by the person who said they wrote it on the date and time that it was written for you specifically. We can verify that, and it's completely legal for us to do so. And guess what? A lot of companies will. A lot of companies will call and be like, hey, just double checking this doctor's note we provided is legitimate. And most of the time we'll get a, yep, it's legit. But sometimes, and it's happened to me more than a couple of times in my career, I've caught people with forged documents, and you are fired like that. Very quickly fired for doing stuff like that. So in this decision, you had to go to the doctor for an allergic reaction. You're cleared to work to return the following day. The HR department asked you if you went to the hospital. Not that you were nervous. You just said you were nervous and that you said yes. Just go back to the HR department and be like, I am so sorry. I was really nervous when I spoke to you. I didn't go to the hospital. I just went to my doctor. Here's the doctor's note clearing me for work or returning me to work. I never went to the hospital. Didn't need to. I apologize for saying that. Most HR departments will be like, okay, well, I mean, next time, just be honest, but okay, whatever, right? You might get written up for it or something like that, but honestly, there's not a whole lot there that they can really document on and fire you over. Now, if you forge a document, though, you can be fired pretty quickly for that, so don't fucking do that one. This next question comes from Ensavageds from Georgia. What is generally expected of part-time employees across the board? It's an interesting question. I work part-time, 3 days a week, at a very slow library. Sometimes life happens. For me, an amalgamation of a different issue, amalgamation maybe? I don't know how to read, man. Of different issues has caused me to miss 2 or 3 days of work across April. In March, I missed 2 or 3 days as well. That's actually kind of a lot, especially if you're part-time. But generally, I always make sure to work other days in the week to compensate, as long as your manager's approving that. And I always say yes whenever my manager asks if I can cover someone else's shift. Unfortunately, I'm unable to make it in this Saturday, the end of my work week, and next Monday, the start of the next work week. And I'm terrified of bringing this up to my manager. A part of me thinks that I'm being too hard on myself because it's not like I'm a full-time employee with benefits getting paid sick leave. I'm a part-time and consequently not being paid for any days I missed. However, my absences make me feel like it's the end of the world because if you only work 3 days a week and miss one of those days, it comes across as much more drastic as if you're missing hours of an already negligible amount of hours per week. I think that if I knew what exactly is reasonably expected from a worker who doesn't receive benefits or paid leave, I'd be able to mentally tackle this issue better because in my efforts to find an answer, I've only seen conversations about the ethics of missing work days while being a recipient of full-time salary and full-time benefits. To be sure, I don't think it's unjust for a manager to expect me to be at work as scheduled. I just want to know the amount of strictness from employers is considered fair towards part-time employees who don't have a bucket allotted of days off to pull from. So there's 2 answers I'm going to give you here. It's going to be the dark side of HR, which I've talked about as a book I want to write, and the front-facing side of HR. So let's start with the front-facing side of HR. Actually, we'll start with the dark side because I want to address an overarching issue that happens in America. Taking time off for any point in time, for any reason, is demonized in America, and I don't understand why. I think a part of it has to do with the fact that our society and our economy is based on greed. And frankly, I'm being very overgeneralistic here, and there's probably a lot of holes that you could poke into what I'm saying. But companies care so much about their profits that they run such slim margins of adjustment with their labor that taking time off is considered detrimental to departments, even though it's really fucking not. So when you have an individual that takes a lot of time off, or even frankly, even a couple of days off, a manager will distinctly say, this impacts my productivity. Therefore, I would rather hire somebody else that will be here instead of you. Like, they don't see the humanity of an employee. A lot of situations, companies don't give a shit, right? That's why attendance policies are so strict. Why you have so many attendance policies that are basically like, hey, if you take more than 6 unplanned absences in a year, you're out of here. Like, what? So that means life can only happen to you 6 times or less a year to keep your job. It's absolutely terrible. So on the more front-facing side of HR, with that understanding behind us, what you've told me, you've already taken 2 or 3 days in March, another 2 to 3 days in April. That's already 6 days. You're essentially missing a week of work worth of time every month for the past 2 months, and you have another day off coming that you need to take. That is a lot, right? With the guys that corporate America hates it when you take time off in general. You telling me that you've already missed essentially 2 work weeks worth of time for you because you work 3 days a week is a lot. I would talk to your manager and be upfront with them every time you need time off, with the understanding that you've already taken kind of a lot. And I know life happens and that's difficult to manage, and that's kind of like the hard part about working in general. But yeah, you have missed a lot. And I will tell you, if you're looking at what's normal across the industry, you've taken a lot of time off, and your manager's patience towards the amount of time off you need might start to wane. This next question comes from Autumn Love 92 in Maryland. How do I drop insurance plan without a qualifying event? I took a high premium, low deductible insurance plan because of a surgery, it looks like. So basically, I'm not going to read through this entire question because it's pretty simple. So dropping insurance, you could do at any time as long as you have subsequent insurance to fall back on, right? So a lot of instances, and again, I'm not really brushed on benefits too much. It's not a world that I've worked in a whole lot. But if you take on an employer plan and you're like, I kind of don't want to be in this plan anymore, some plans require you to provide proof that you're being covered elsewhere, whether by the marketplace or whether by maybe a spouse insurance or something like that before you're allowed to drop. I believe there are plans that allow you to drop insurances, though, without any real reason. But the fact that you cannot adjust or add your insurance or like drop and re-add without what's called a life-changing or a qualifying event, which would be, say, the loss of an employment of a spouse, the birth of a child, divorce, death, things like that. So you're not allowed to just constantly adjust your insurance. And a big reason for that is because the federal government likes to think that we're all trying to commit insurance fraud. So if you, for example, have a surgery coming up that's going to be expensive and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to adjust my insurance to be, higher deductible, but it covers more. And then once that surgery is over, I'm going to drop to the cheapest plan again. The government thinks that that's fraudulent and sucks, I guess. I don't know. So you can probably drop your insurance. I would talk to your HR department about that, see if your plan allows you to do that. It may not, though, but you're not allowed to just change your plan without some kind of event happening. So hopefully that answers that question. All right, my last video was kind of long, so I'm going to go ahead and end on this question. This comes from FancyCat777 from New York. It just says, my new mess is a job, and I don't know what the fuck to do. Please help. All right, let's see if we can help. So a few weeks ago, I started working for a new company. I've had several job offers, but chose this one because they had the best pay and benefits. Ooh, shouldn't only take jobs based on pay and benefits. The entire package is required. I applied for 100% remote work with a particular division of a large company in the end of 2022 of March, so a couple months ago. The hiring manager contacted me for an interview pretty fast, too fast, as I would soon find out, and set up a 5-person interview with the entire team of people. They all seemed to love me, which I thought was a little weird, but whatever. A couple of days later, you've already identified all your red flags. I don't know. You took the job with the red flags, I guess. A couple days later, the same hiring manager calls me with a frantic edge, telling me they loved me so much that they need me to apply to a different job entirely. I was kind of confused because this job was presented as being managerial, and I didn't have any managerial experience outside of overseeing a few people with my own freelance business. It struck me as kind of desperate and a red flaggy, and boy was I right. but I rolled with it anyway to see what would happen. It's funny how your tuition is usually spot on. The hiring manager promised me that if I just applied to the job, they wouldn't even need to interview me again, so she would just give it to me. Lie number one. Soon, another interview was scheduled with some other lady. This one told me that I would basically be managing without the power of a manager. Great wording, very appealing. I don't like your tone, question asker. Are you actually asking for advice, or are you ranting about a scenario? Anyways, because I was bored and honestly just wanted to see what would happen at this point, I continued to roll with it. And you know the expression about curiosity and a cat? Yeah. Joke teller. Red flag number 2, the hiring manager asked me to prepare a slide, unpaid, for the first week of the job before I was even on payroll. Stupidly, I did. So I'm getting frustrated with this person's question because A, it's not a question, and B, you're basically inciting and making fun of this company, which you did and rolled with. Like, all of these things that are red flags, you're like, yeah, I knew it was a red flag and they're stupid as shit, but I'm equally as stupid as shit and decided to go with it. Like, what are you doing, dude? Anyway, let's keep reading. This goes on for quite a bit, and I'm really excited to read the rest of this and pick it apart. Anyways, they lowballed me on the offer despite me having 7+ years of experience, which is mid-level. And communication was absolutely awful from the start. I received a schedule for my first week on the Friday before I started, and my eyes nearly bugged out of my head. So they lowballed you on an offer, but you took the job because it was the best pay and benefits? So it sounds like maybe you're just not in a good market because you haven't gotten any better offers yet, or maybe you're not as worth of whatever salary you're thinking as you might think you are. That was a weird sentence. I received a schedule for my first week, and my eyes nearly bugged out. Meetings. It was all meetings, literally blocks and blocks of meetings with nothing but people rambling about the internet. I was hired as a writer, by the way, but writing was never talked about or mentioned even once. So when you're first starting off in a new job, you're going to be in a lot of meetings. That's kind of the point. Now here's where it gets dicey. Remember how I said this job was 100% remote? Yeah, on the second day, the manager gave me this long and boring presentation about ethics, accountability, being honest. That's actually pretty standard HR stuff. Then at the very end, she sprung onto me that we're having a meeting in Louisiana in a couple of weeks. How fun. She really, really wanted me to be there. Okay, so if you ever see a job that says 100% remote, take a look at the job posting and see if there's any mention of travel requirements. Because if you can have a job that's 100% remote, but it doesn't mean that it's 100% work from where you currently are. It could mean, hey, you're 100% remote because we're going to need you to transition and travel at times for the position itself. Now, they should be upfront and honest with that at the interviewing and hiring process, but as you said, this company is stupid and dumb and poopy idiots. So I'm guessing they didn't do that. I raised an eyebrow and said, I'm not sure about that, but okay. In my head, I already knew I wasn't going because I literally never been on an airplane and am afraid to fly. But I was in for a good one here. She just wouldn't let it go. She carried on and on about not only this, but all the other future trips they hadn't planned out yet. She said verbatim, you'll be flying a lot for this job. That probably should have been mentioned in the interview for sure. This was not in the job description. This was not mentioned once during any of the interviews or for any of the many phone calls. Needless to say, I was extremely upset. So I understand you being upset here. Again, I'm going to take this from two different sides. From an HR standpoint, yeah, if an employer doesn't disclose that there's going to be a lot of travel in both the job description or during the interview process, it could be very frustrating when you jump into a job and suddenly you have to travel and you weren't expecting to do that. That's tough, right? That's a tough scenario to be a part of. But also, you admitted, question asker, that early on you were like, well, I'm just here for the ride at this point. I know these guys are idiots. What did you expect, man? Of course, she wouldn't stop talking and kept carrying on about how it was an essential part of the job. She went as far as saying, unless it's some sort of phobia. So she literally grilled me on my personal medical info on the second day. No, she didn't. If she says some sort of phobia is a bad way of stating it, but your boss can literally say, like, here's an essential function of the job. Can you do it with or without accommodations, or do you need some kind of medical accommodation? That's a perfectly valid question to ask. Because if you have that, you have to disclose it to them so that they can then try to reasonably accommodate. That's a part of the ADA process. You might think that this is the end, but it actually gets even crazier. I was too upset to return to work on that day because I had a really bad panic attack after realizing I'd been baited and switched, even though early on you basically said that you're here for the ride. Okay. And again, I'm not going to disparage anybody for having panic attacks. Those are real issues, and like that is, it's a very scary thing to go through. for sure. And not only was this not a writing job, but it actually involved flying all over the country. I desperately tried to get in touch with HR for days to no avail, and then finally they got back to me. They acted all nice and sweet about it and said she was probably just excited people could fly again, and offered me a week off while they straightened everything out. They presented this time off in an extremely weird fashion, acting like it was a medical leave, even though a doctor never signed me out of work. I spent a lot of time talking to people on the phone that day. Okay. A couple days later, some investigator guy wanted to talk to me about how the manager asked for my personal info and misled me about the job. Did you actually tell the HR department that somebody was talking and asking and inquiring about your medical condition? Because this is where you get people that will talk to you from HR about like, hey, so she asked you to disclose medical information. Like, can you talk about that? If you even mention that even once, HR departments take that seriously because that is against federal law. So we set up an hour, but he said it could take up to 2. And then I remembered the PowerPoint and thought to myself, was I getting paid for this? So I emailed the first HR guy and he told me, nope, it's an unpaid leave. I was never informed of this when they took me out on the supposed medical leave. I am on salary, so of course I expected to be paid for this, but nope. They actually had the audacity to tell me I'm not being paid for this time, despite the fact that they took me out after their manager literally grilled me about medical info on the job. That is not grilling you on medical information, though. But again, if a company does take you off on medical leave, then you did not request for it, I would actually get in touch with an attorney there. They probably should pay you for that time. And they expected me to cooperate with their internal investigation during this time and dedicated hours helping them to probably fire me in the end. That's pessimistic of you. Needless to say, I was furious. In the end, I was so mad I emailed a bunch of people higher up and finally got to backpedal. The HR guy pretended he never said it was unpaid and told me I'd get paid for that week out. The investigation was pushed back to the next week, as it should have been, so I could actually get paid for it. My therapist called them and talked to them, and they were suddenly said they don't need a letter anymore, and my absence is excused. What the fuck is going on? Why would they not want a letter out of the blue asking for one for a week? I've had the past week off, and tomorrow I have a meeting with HR to discuss all of this, and I'm totally lost. Tomorrow I have a meeting with the investigator guy, and I have no idea what I should say or not say. This honestly feels like lawyer territory at this point because it's such a mess. But they've sent me a bunch of expensive equipment, like a computer, etc., so I have no clue what to do. Desperately seeking advice. Is this even remotely normal, or is this company bonkers? It looks like this person has posted before. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts here. We'll end the video on this question. So, there's a lot of miscommunication from this company. It sounds like it looks like it's a particular division of a large company is what you said. So it sounds like the larger company should have HR practices that the smaller divisions should, be adhering to. But it sounds like there's not a lot of checks and balances in that regard, especially if you just got hired into a job where there's a lot of travel required, but that wasn't designated in the job description or during the interview process, which you said it didn't. And I'm going to take your word for it because that's all I can. That's a pretty big red flag in general. There's no like legality issue with a company basically telling you have to travel, right? If they're going to pay you to travel, like you kind of have to try to do it. Or if not, they can let you go and try to find somebody else to do that traveling instead, right? If you do have a medical condition that prevents you from flying or doing things like that, you have to disclose that to your company in order to work through a reasonable accommodation process and to have an interactive process to determine those things, right? That's a part of ADA. You can't just be given like, hey, I need you to fly tomorrow as a part of your job. And you'd be like, well, I have a phobia, so I can't. And then not expect the company to be like, that's actually kind of a big problem to us. Like we need to figure this out quickly, right? A supervisor, based on what you said, this is my first biggest issue. Actually, let's rewind. My first biggest issue with everything that you just said here is that you saw all these red flags and decided, I'll go with it. And then now you're upset that those red flags were red flags. You self-sabotaged yourself into this position. Like all of these indicators of companies that have these internal issues were presented to you in a way that's so blatantly obvious according to what you wrote, and you still went with it, and then you're upset. Like that's weird to me, right? So it's not like human error happens, but this almost felt intentional. So you have intentionally put yourself in a disparaging situation and then are upset about it. So I understand why you might be upset, but you understand the irony here as well. The second big issue that I have with this is that you presented us with the only statement, which is when your manager says, well, you have to fly as a part of the job unless a phobia is present. That's not great worded, but it's not inherently illegal that she said that. That is not grilling you on your medical information. Your leader can ask you, can you fulfill all of the required parts of this job with or without accommodation? Like, that is completely legal to ask, because there's a part of the Americans with Disabilities Act that allows an employer to have an interactive conversation with you to determine your ability to perform your job. And if you cannot perform the essential functions of the job and need an accommodation, the company has the right to engage with you on that, to determine that accommodation, and if it is feasible or it provides an undue hardship onto the organization, where it becomes unfeasible to do that. So her simply asking if you have a phobia of flying is not grilling you on your medical information. But if you turn around and tell an HR department, hey, by the way, my manager is like asking about medical stuff about me, the HR department's going to be like, holy shit, we have to investigate that, because it's against the law to do that blanketly, right? I can't walk up to you and be like, hey, how's it going? You look like you're kind of a bitch for peanut butter. Like, you look like you're allergic to peanut. Are you allergic to peanut butter? Like, you can't really do that. So an HR department's going to launch an investigation, right? It's going to be a big one. So you can't really be surprised that they did that. Anyway, I don't know. I would talk to HR and just be really upfront and honest with the entire scenario. Basically, everything you wrote here, like, kind of have a sit-down conversation with them about it. See what they want to do as a company. But it sounds like you hate this job, man. And it sounds like you hated it from the moment you even started talking about it. So I would find a different job. I don't know. Seems like kind of a no-brainer. All right, that was a crazy session of r/AskHR. Let me know if you have any comments in the comment section below. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff that helps YouTube channels out. And I appreciate you guys a lot. I'm Buffalo Prime, and I'm out.